Welcome to another episode of An Extraordinary Take, where we share extraordinary ideas and visions with extraordinary people. My name is Bo, your host, and I'm so excited that you were able to join me for this episode. Let's get into it, shall we?
My name is Bo, and I am so grateful to be back here. It's been a while, and I know I owe you a massive apology. I think we have not gone live for at least probably 2-3 weeks. And that wasn't the plan. So one, the reason for that was that I was away, so I went away on holiday. But before that, my plan was to record all these episodes so that while I was away, we could keep going live every Thursday as per usual. And it just did not happen the way I planned. The guests suddenly weren't able to make it. There were issues with the studio. And yeah, eventually I was just like, you know what? It's fine. I'm gonna let it go, and when I'm back, I'll be back. And now I'm back, but I am sorry for all of that time where there was all of that silence. It was worthwhile. I don't apologize for the holiday itself. I apologize for the silence. And next time we'll definitely plan better. But yeah, I'm so grateful to be back. I was so happy even just getting ready to come here, because this space has become so important to me. The other reason why I wanted to record before I left for holiday was because that would have been the 10th episode of, the season, or since I started the podcast. And I thought it would have been so nice to do that 10th episode and then come back with like a fresh start with season 2 with better, fresher perspective. I like the idea around it, but I'm still excited, and I'm so proud that we have made it this far, because there was so much overthinking, and and I've said before that I had friends of mine who were just like, we're done. We don't want to hear about this because all you do is talk about it, but you're not doing it. So the fact that we're actually here and it's happening and we're on episode 10 is amazing. And I'm so proud of myself, and I'm proud of you and everybody else that has, helped me actually make it this far. It's not that far, but it's pretty far from nothing. Okay. 0 to 10, I think that's a great feat. So I have to also just give you the props, because it's been so affirming. I can't believe how affirming it is, just reading the comments, and hearing your own perspective of what this space is and what it's doing for you. It's the best thing ever. One of the comments that I read, actually, I don't know how long ago it was, but quite recently, where this lady was like, where were you? Because I needed all of this before, and I thought, that's so beautiful. And it just goes to show that there really is space for our yearnings. There really is space for our dreams. Even if that had just come from one person, even if there hadn't been other people echoing the same sentiment, I think it still just means so much for me. So I have to say thank you for that. A special shout out to the TikTok audience who just keep engaging throughout, even when nothing's been posted, even when I was away. I love just seeing you guys talking amongst yourselves and giving solutions and sometimes fighting it out. And it's interesting. And for me, it just makes me happy to see that we've created a platform like that. And I know that it'll continue to grow, but I'm so happy for where we are now. Anyway, I did not plan to be that sentimental, but maybe it's what holidays do to you. A friend of mine actually asked me to do an episode about traveling and about, going on holiday. And because when we were speaking, I realized that there's so many misconceptions around it, like especially shockingly, even within like the working class, where there's so many people who just don't think that it's possible, who think like you need so much more money, you need all of these things like before you can actually do it, and so hold them back from having experiences, hold themselves back from having experiences like that, because there's this idea that it should be a certain way. And initially I didn't really want to do it, but I think it is important to speak about it, because I do think that creating moments like that for yourself is so important, to live intentionally and to give yourself whatever joy you can is profoundly, profoundly important. But I don't know how to explain it, but I'm kind of holding two. This other lady I used to work with used to call it two truths, but I'm holding two. I'll say two truths actually, simultaneously, and sometimes conversations like that are difficult for me to have, because I am aware that there's so many liberties that we have that other people don't have. There's so many things that we get to do, that we get to experience, that certain people may never in their entire lifetimes get to, and the reasons for that are nuanced, right? But because I'm such an empath, I struggle to just live in one moment and let that one moment be what it is. I'm kind of always holding a lot of different perspectives and a lot of different moments in one. And one of the things that I have been grappling with, and which I know I'm not alone in this, is like that while I was on holiday, and while I was, experiencing new food for the first time, new surroundings and people, there were children in Gaza who are being starved, blatantly starved to death by Israel. And families being torn apart and homes being bombed, churches being bombed, and all of those things are happening at the same time, in the same planet, in the same world. There is not just the conflict that is going on in so many different parts of the world, including Sudan, and so many other places that are just facing unimaginable pain and unimaginable trauma and unimaginable terror. There are also parts of the world where life continues, where as other children are being bombed and starved to death, others are being born and being introduced to new homes in cribs with loving family members and homes, with roofs and with love and with safety. And it is something I don't know if we will ever come to understand. But it is also something that I think we have to reckon with. It's something that we can't run away from. And I know, often, particularly when it comes to the genocide happening in Palestine, currently, one of the things that Palestinians have been saying is, don't look away. Witness us, witness our pain. Even if there's nothing else that you can do, speak about us, witness us. And I know that for so many people, they're like, no, I can't. I can't look at the pictures. I can't just be scrolling through picture after picture and video after video of dead limbs and bodies dying for no reason, for no absolute reason, except for just human cruelty and greed. But I do think that one of the measures of how well we're able to live our lives is being able to hold two conflicting ideas and realities at the same time, and being able to make space for that, even when it feels like it shouldn't be the case. I remember when I was planning my wedding and I was in the throes of all of it, and I think then the wedding happened and I hadn't even started posting the pictures. And I remember one of my friends said, yo, can Spo just chill with all the Gaza content and concentrate on her wedding, and they weren't being malicious, and I understand it and I get it. And I think sometimes we are too fixated on a moment being just one thing. We're too fixated on life being just one thing. But the reality of it is life is so complex. It's so many different things. And I did not come here to speak about this, but it has been weighing heavy, on my heart, especially as things keep worsening and worsening and worsening in Gaza. And we are, living in a time where people just don't want to speak about it. Churches are not saying anything. Organizations are not saying anything. Certain governments are not saying anything. I mean, our government has really, really tried, and I really applaud them for their efforts. But we are in a tricky time where sometimes it feels like all we can do is speak about it. But what I have also been thinking about is, what does it mean to live and for life to move on and continue as some of the biggest atrocities happen around us? Is there no space for our joy? And if there is space for our joy, is there no space for the grief that we should also have, and that we should also carry for the people in the world that are losing their lives in terrible, terrible ways. And I think even here in South Africa, we are familiar with that, even when it comes to gender-based violence, where there are families every day that are losing their children at the hands of, terror from men. And I guess what matters is to ask us who we are, or rather to ask ourselves who we are within the context of all of that. So, like, who am I within the context of the genocide currently happening, within the context of what's happening in Sudan? And what is my role, right? And what can my role be? And one of the things I've been thinking a lot about is, like, when other atrocities happened, like, it's a question I don't always ask, but I always think about, post 1994, when we were all playing Happy Family, I meet certain white people that are older, and I wonder, what were you doing during the time of apartheid? Like, how did you feel about it? Like, we're good now. We're friends now, but what was your stance? Because it served you, did you feel that it was okay? Did you feel like it was just normal, that Black people lived the way that they lived and white people lived the way that they lived? Like, or did you look at it and think there's something wrong with this picture? And I think a lot of the times when comfort is on our side, we tend to not want to see the discomfort of others. When our rights are met, we tend to not bother ourselves about the rights of others that are not met. And a classic example of this is like how, growing up in the suburb or growing up in the townships or rural areas, there's certain issues, that people face there. And very often what we think is, I can't wait to get out of here, versus I can't wait to do something or to be able to do something about this. And this is no judgment. It's how we are, right? We are in some ways wired to take care of ourselves, to want better lives for ourselves. But I do think that we have to ask ourselves, who are we in the context of wars? Who are we in the context of genocide? Who are we in the context of injustice? Whether it's injustice towards gay and lesbian people or the queer community, or whether it's injustice against, brown people, whether it's injustice against different religious beliefs. If you're a Christian, how do you feel about injustice against Muslims? All of those things, I do think that it's things that we have to make room for, and it's things that we have to be able to ask ourselves in order for us to really have a fuller picture of who we are, but also of who we are trying to be and what it is that we're trying to do here. And we'll find that this podcast or this episode has more questions than it has answers, because these are things that I'm grappling with, but I think it's things that we should all be grappling with. And what I want to hold space for is that it is also a revolutionary act to make space for our joy in times of terror. Because we live in a world where we don't know when or how it could all come to an end. When you look at the before and after pictures of Gaza, it is mind-blowing, the difference in how they went from one moment looking exactly like just any other city, with buildings, with restaurants, with swimming pools. And it's not about being rich. It's just like living, going to school, going to university, going to work, to nothing, to almost all the hospitals being bombed, all the schools being bombed, all the churches being bombed. Can't even tell you about restaurants. It's all gone. And what is alarming about the world that we live in is we don't know the concept of enough. There are powerful people amongst us who don't know what enough is, and who want and want and want and want and want and want that they get to a point where even human life means nothing if it means they can get more. And it's important to talk about this because we also live in a time where we are being fed this hustle culture, where we are being fed this go get yours, go get yours, go get yours, make more, bigger, 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 better, 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 with no end in sight. And we are here because we have lost the concept of what is enough for me. We've lost the concept of I must have, but so must Freeman, so must Sizakele, so must Bongi, so must Clapton. Like, it's not that only I must have. It's like you must have, and you must have it all. And there are, I saw a video from this lady, who was saying like, on my journey to becoming a millionaire by and we're constantly being fed all of this content around just more, that I do believe that it is making us or creating us into a society that does not care who we trample on in our quest to get this more. because the reality with regards to, now I'm no politician or a researcher, but the reality with regards to Israel and Palestine is Israel is trying to get land and trying to take over, and has already taken over a place that isn't theirs. But even with that, they were living separately. And the Palestinians were not fighting them in saying, you have taken over our land, you have taken over where we are supposed to be. They were not fighting them. They were keeping to their side of the land, even though with all of that, Israel was cutting their water supply, their electricity, dictating where they can and cannot go in their own land. But because they can't get enough, because they can't get enough, we find ourselves here. And it's a sad state for humanity when we start fighting over nature, something that we were never meant to own in the first place, something we were supposed to inhabit but not own. And with that, I get to this point. I loved that I was able to travel. I enjoyed my time away. And if anything, I think traveling is so important because we are often so stuck in our own way of thinking, and our own way of thinking is not our own way of thinking. It is impacted by where we are, by the people around us, by how they think. It's very rare for one's thoughts to be unique. A lot of the times, the thoughts that are ruminating in your head are thoughts that have been influenced by those around you. You go live in a place long enough, you start speaking like the people from there. Start thinking like the people from there. Sometimes start dressing like the people from there. And what does that say? It says that sometimes if you don't get out of your comfort zone, you can only grow or go as far as the people from where you're from have gone, or as far as your environment allows. And I am such a believer of questioning and questioning and questioning and questioning and questioning, of saying like, yes, this is our culture, but what are other cultures in the world like? Yes, these are our rules, but what do other people believe? Yes, this is what we think is right and wrong, but what about them? And why do they think like that? Because then that allows you to expand your way of thinking, to expand your way of seeing people, but to also expand your empathy. And I was, saying to a friend of mine when I came back, is that I realized like we had dinner the other night when we were in Greece, and at the table, we had, I think, around 10, 12 people, and at least 8 of those people were all from different nationalities, which is insane, right? But I was saying to her that I appreciated that experience so much because it allowed me to tap into the differences that we have just by virtue of where it is that we come from, right? The way somebody from Germany thinks versus the way that somebody from Greece thinks versus the way that somebody from South Africa thinks is such a aha moment, and such an incredible learning experience if all you have ever experienced are people from South Africa. And they felt the same way about interacting with us, right? And they were like, oh, that's what you guys do. That's so interesting. We don't do that. And one of the things that I found to be interesting is our idea of wealth and a good life was very interesting, and I'll explain to you why. We had this conversation where we're talking about this guy who recently moved abroad, and he started earning, like, his first job is a lot of money, like a lot of money. But he's originally South African, but he has lived abroad for a very, very long time. So I think he spent maybe his formative years in South Africa, but he went to school abroad and then has started working abroad. And so when we're having this conversation, somebody, I think it was my husband, was like, oh man, if he like works maybe for like a couple of years and then saves up all of this money or as much of it as he can and then comes back to South Africa, he will be very, very rich here because, of course, he's getting paid in euros that side, And as we started having this conversation, I was like, based on my interaction, it does not feel like the people this side, like that's their goal. And this guy does not give me the impression that he is making all of this money so that he can store it away and become a rich person in South Africa. The standard that side seemed to be, you just have a good home. And by good home, most of the people there, working class, live in apartments. So it's not a home. A house. A house is not a home. It's not a house in the sense that the way that we know houses, right? It's like a flat, as what we would call it. But sometimes it can be like a 2-bedroom flat or a 3-bedroom flat. And for them, having a 2-bedroom flat, 3-bedroom flat with your partner and maybe a kid is good. And then additionally, having a car is not a measure of wealth there. Like most of the people, even really, really well-paid people, don't have cars. And it's not a thing. But of course, I have to put this here is that, or put this in parentheses, they have very good transportation system. So they can get away with not having a car. But it's not a measure of success. Whereas in South Africa, it's almost like your first job, you have to get a car. Like you're not working if you don't have a car. It doesn't mean anything if you're not driving to work or to or from work, And for the most part, the one thing that they did say was like, for them, a good life is one, having a home, being able to take care of your family, but then from time to time also being able to travel. Not necessarily being able to travel to the most expensive places, but just being able to see something different and something new, because they really prioritize and really value those kinds of experiences over living in a mansion. Whereas here in South Africa, I feel like our priority is you definitely have to have a mansion. Like being rich is having a massive house. Being rich is having at least 3 cars, you know. And then we also want like these these garages, you know, that are glass so that you can see the cars that are inside. Like we're very into big stuff. And it's very interesting when you travel and you meet people from different countries and that's not their lens. They're like, no, I'm good with this. Like I'm good with my 2-bedroom apartment. I'm good with my, with, you know, walking out the door, being able to get into a tube or train, go to work, come back, and then whenever possible, I go visit another country. And I often find that as South Africans, we hold ourselves back from certain experiences because we believe that we need to have full, rich lives here first before we can see other parts of the world. And so as I was thinking about this, I was thinking about, you know, when my friend asked me to do this episode, and it started about something completely different and it's moving to something completely different. But I was thinking about like some of the misconceptions that we have around traveling. And I want to debunk a few of those here. One, I'll start with the one that I had here. The misconception that before you can travel to a different country or a different state or whatever, you need to own stuff in your country first. So you need to have your own house first. You need to have your own car first. Like your life in the country where you are must be in order first, because otherwise we are like, why are you traveling when you don't even have a car back home? In fact, this was something that a friend of mine said, where she was like, when she started her first job, her colleagues just did not understand why she used her money to go travel to Mauritius when she didn't even have a car to drive to work. And she was like, well, our priorities are not the same. And I think it's things like that that hold certain people back from experiencing travel, experiencing new places, because you feel like, haibo, ngzatingi when I don't even have this and I don't even have that. You don't need that. It's this idea of waiting for something before you can. And if you have listened, which I would assume that you have, to the first part of this conversation, you will understand the importance of making the most of now. Because the reality is there's so many things that we can do that so many other people around the world just cannot. And there's so many things that we can do that so many people, even around us, just cannot yet. So if you can, do it. The other misconception around traveling is you need to do it with a partner or with friends. Not true. You don't need to wait. If you have the means, you don't need to wait. You don't need to be booed up. You don't need to have a friend trip before you can actually go and experience new places. If you have a job where you can save even as little as 500 Rand or 1,000 Rands a month, you can, after a year, depending on where you want to go. Because by the way, traveling does not only mean or is not only limited to leaving the country. You can travel within your country. You can also travel within the continent. But you don't need other people to travel and to make the most of it. What you do need, though, is a personality, or you don't need it directly or in the beginning. You do need to be able to work out. For example, if you're shy, that's gonna be difficult, because if you're traveling alone, even if you're traveling with somebody, if you're going to a new place, you're gonna have to ask a lot of people for a lot of information, a lot of times, because you're going to go to a place. Like, if I tell you how many times my husband and I got lost in Rome, because sometimes people don't want to explain. Sometimes the moment you start and you speak in English, they walk away. So you need to have patience, and you need to have the kind of personality where you're like, hi, can you please help me? I'm looking for the train. And maybe you can just disarm them by, your bubbliness. And I'm not a bubbly person, but luckily, like, my husband's better at that. So it's not so much about traveling in groups or traveling with people or traveling with someone. It's more about working out the courage in yourself to try new things without it needing to be group work or a partnership. It's more about allowing yourself to open yourself up to certain new worlds, to certain places, without knowing the full plan, without knowing exactly what it's going to be like. Right? And I think that's sometimes what the scary thing about, like, traveling alone. Of course, safety aside, that's a massive thing, especially if you're a woman. There are plenty of resources on the kind of places you need to travel to and the places you can travel to as a single person for safety reasons. So it's important to make note of those. But more than anything, you have to be open to adventure. You have to be open to not knowing how it's going to go. And even as you are in that process, you have to be open to meeting new people, to starting conversation, to asking questions, to being interested in other people, not just yourself. And that can really start to crack your shell, I'll say, a little bit. And this is something I really, really do recommend, particularly if you're single. You have to at least have traveled once or twice by yourself. At least once or twice by yourself before you actually settle down with somebody else. And the reason for that is that traveling is one of the experiences that really allows you to learn so much about yourself, especially so much about what your preferences are. Because you can't tell me that you know what your preferences are in anything, be it food or partner or friends, if you've only ever been exposed to those things within your environment and within your country. Because then what are you comparing it to, right? Like, if you say, I love, or I only want to date Zulu men, for example, what do you know about Tonga men? What do you know about Sotho men? What do you know? Like, you can't say that in a vacuum. You can't say I only date Zulu men and you've only ever lived in KZN where there are only Zulu men. It doesn't make sense. And so it's the same with traveling. A lot of the times we think we already know what we like. We think we already know who we are. But what we actually just need to do is get out of where we've been, and that can even extend our idea of ourselves. And so I think it's the most important thing. And then when you do meet your person, you can say things like, oh, the best food I ever had was from so-and-so country. It just makes you a more complete person. It makes you, it adds color to you. So that's the other misconception, is you can only travel when you have a partner and you can only travel with friends. It's not true. I would suggest, though, that if you are going to travel alone, you do it through a travel agency, where sometimes they've got like group things. If you're really afraid, they do have like group trips. Then it's you on your own, but you are doing it with a whole lot, or a whole group of other people. And by the way, this counts for men too. I really, really do believe that South African men in particular, and African men in a broader sense who should travel. And I will tell you why I think it's even more important for men to travel, is because, again, for the same reason, for the same thing that it does for women, is it allows you to expand your view of not just yourself as a man, but your view of women, right? Like, a lot of the times you think that your preference in women is your preference, but it's actually not. It's based on what you have been exposed to. It's based on your aunts. It's based on the baddies that you've seen at the club. It's based on just the small scene here. But the moment you begin to travel and you start to see the different ways that other women show up, different ways that other women dress, different body types, and how women dress for those body types, it really, really opens up your mind to your own misconceptions around what women should look like, how women are supposed to behave. Because to experience, for example, an Italian woman versus a Greek woman versus a South African woman is completely different. There's lots of similarities because women are women, but there's also lots of differences, right? I mean, if you really think about it, we grew up at a time where in church, kwakutiwa, women aren't allowed to wear pants. And so when I was growing up at that time, a lot of my friends, my male friends, their idea of a good wife is like a wife that wears like a long skirt, covers her head, etc., etc., etc. There are countries and parts of the world where they would laugh at that, and it's not to say it's laughable, it is, but it's to say that it's just different. And so you owe yourself different experiences. You owe yourself experiencing different people, so that you aren't caged to what your uncle say is a real man. Because the other part of it is you'll see how other men show up. If you travel, you're going to start to see that there are certain things that men in other countries do that, for example, here in South Africa, we would consider to be maybe gay, or we would consider to be like, I know a man doesn't act like that, but it's freeing. There's certain experiences that you wouldn't even be open to do here, that if you traveled, you'd realize, oh, it's completely fine. And I think then also, ladies, when you are looking at somebody to date and vice versa, look for experiences like that, because then you're meeting somebody who's not going to cage you to one identity, who's not going to want you to be one thing. And so this counts for both men and women. The other thing, and this is more for women, is that you need new clothes. You need a completely new wardrobe before you can travel, or to travel. It's not true. I think, again, Instagram, external viewing, sometimes it gives us this sense of like, my life needs to be like this before I can do this. and I need to have this before I can do this. Again, it's not true. You can travel with the clothes that you have. Yes, it's nice to get a few items that align with wherever it is that you're going. So if you're going to go on a boat cruise, or if you're going to do whatever, then you're like, okay, I need this kind of like attire. That's perfectly fine. It's also important to read up on like different regulations for how different countries dress. If you're going to, for example, go to different churches, sometimes they want you to cover up your knees as well as your shoulders. So you need to be aware of things like that. But don't break the bank buying new wardrobe and then getting to a point where you can't even have certain experiences because you felt like it's more about how you look rather than just being there. The purpose of travel is the experience. The purpose of travel is meeting new people, is having new experiences, is seeing new places and learning new ways or different ways of doing things. That's the purpose of travel. It's not what Instagram says. It's not the picture perfect things. It's not the reels. It's what it does to you. It's the perspective that it leaves you with. And you can go on holiday and live in a small anyana Airbnb, only eating, I can't say McDonald's because that's on the boycott list, or I can't say KFC, but like only literally eating maybe like small anyana burger and chips because you don't have money for the luxurious hotels or the luxurious restaurants. But you can come back so happy because you explored, you went to different marketplaces, you spoke to different people. Like that's what traveling is about. That's the real meaning behind it. And you will forever hold yourself back from having that experience if you compare to what it looks like on Instagram. Like how I travel now as a married person versus how I traveled back then when I just started working is completely different. Also, how you will travel on like from a 2-income household is different to how you will travel as a single person. So don't put so much pressure on yourself by seeing all of these things that you start to think like, oh, I have to wait at least 10 years before I can have the perfect holiday. It's not true. So don't break the bank on clothes. You don't need to. Then I think the other one, which is quite obvious, I'm sure at this point, is that you need a lot of money. You don't. It's just about how well you save, and also about picking a place that is friendly to your pocket. And by that I mean like learning about different currencies. So before you travel, look up the currency of the country where you'll be going to and compare it to the rand. There are certain countries and certain places around the world that are very friendly with the rand, like Bali, Turkey, I think. What's the other one? I think I'll actually, if you guys want, we can create a different post of like the different places that you can go to that are a little bit more friendly. But look up those places, and then what you can find is that they cost the same as maybe going on holiday here to Cape Town. So then you decide, oh, instead of going to Cape Town for December, we're going to do Bali, and it'll cost more or less the same except for flights. So again, there's this misconception of like, oh my God, it's so expensive. Yes, it's expensive if you're taking the rand to Europe. Oh, my babe, it will show you flames, right? Rand, euro, not best friends. Rand, dollar, not best friends. But there are other currencies that get along very well with the rand. So look for currencies like that and then start planning your trip, because then you realize, oh, okay, a meal that I can maybe spend or money that I spend on a meal in South Africa at Uko or even at Steers is like the same as a restaurant in Bali or as a restaurant in this place. And then it just makes it easier for you. So there are a lot of things that are at your disposal that sometimes you just don't know about because it looks so grand on Instagram. And what you don't know about, like a lot of the holidays that people are taking and the pictures that they're taking, is that they may be staying in the shadiest part of that city, but they pick the best spots to take pictures. And so you think that the pictures that you see, that's the entire experience. It's not. They're just doing it like in a clever way, which anyway, whatever rocks your boat, you can do whatever it is that you want. But my point is, sometimes we feel like certain experiences are too big for us or too far for us, when it's actually not the case. And sometimes the thing that's holding you back is not finances. Sometimes the thing that's holding you back is just like your own fears around doing things on your own. Sometimes it's your own fears around trying something new. And I do think that you owe yourself those experiences, and you owe yourself like what it feels like. You know, you owe yourself an experience of you in a different place, because trust me, you're a different person in a different place. It just invokes a different part of you that you would have never experienced had you stayed where you stayed. So if you can, please do it. If it was not on your list of priorities before, right? If your list of priorities before was that you need to build a house for your mother, and then you need to build a house for yourself, and then you need to buy a car, kaume way to live. You know, I'm not saying don't build a house for your mom. Please. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying don't build a house for yourself. I'm not saying don't buy a car. But I am saying that those things do not necessarily need to be mutually exclusive. Sometimes you can give yourself a really joyful experience without needing to have every box in your life ticked. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, this check, house check, car check. Okay, now I can do it. Life doesn't work like that. You can do it like this. You can jumble it up whichever way that you want to. And sometimes the people in our lives put like a lot of fear in us. So like, I spoke a lot about how your surroundings influence what you think, who you are, how you speak, how you dress, etc., etc. And sometimes people around you will dissuade you from doing certain things just because they've never had that experience. So if you got your first job and you haven't bought a car, and you go to your mom and you say, hey, I'm going to Bali on holiday with my bonus at the end of the year, and they're like, how are you doing that when you haven't even bought a car? How are you doing this when you haven't even done this and that? Their priorities are different to yours, but also their experience is different to yours. And you owe yourself a new experience. You owe yourself a wider lens at what it really means to be alive, at what it really means to give yourself a good life. And so a lot of the times, some of the people around us, even when they're well-meaning, can drag us to sameness, can drag us to not elevating just because that's not their experience. And I always make the example of, Jay-Z's uncle that he always speaks about, who, when he told him that he wants to be a rapper, who just said to him, like, there's no way, bro. There's no way that you can make a living and be able to take care of your family from music, especially rap, And Jay-Z always says, like, that he doesn't hold it against his uncle, because his uncle was using his own perspective, was using his own experience of what he had seen all his life. And he was telling him, like, I'm 50, or I've lived this long and I've never seen what you're talking about. And he was cautioning him. He didn't want him to get hurt. He didn't want him to look back at his life and feel like, I wasted it. So it was coming from a good place. But was it true? No. And so we always have to consider the source. But more often than not, we always have to look outside of our current surroundings to see what's really possible. We have to look beyond the people that are comfortable around us, the people that we've known all our lives. If we're going to do something new, we might have to go somewhere new. If we're going to build something new, we might have to be around new people. We might have to expose ourselves to different new places. And I advocate for that so much, like trying out even within your own country. Visit other places, visit other churches. They'll beat me at mine, but like visit other churches, visit other restaurants that are from different sort of, like a Mozambican restaurant, without having been to Mozambique first, like that's so important, and it can do so much. And I even think about, like, then when you have kids, right? When we get to that point, it's like we can give our children such a broader sense of life, right? Like the people that I was with on holiday, all their kids are going to university abroad, which when I was at school, we didn't even know was an option. We were thinking UJ, DUT, VITS, and now I was with a colleague of my husband's, and they were like, oh no, I'm taking my daughter to Turkey so that she can see the university that she wants to go to. And by the way, it's a public university, so it's not so much about the money. It's just exposure. It's allowing yourself to break out of the cage that we sometimes put ourselves in, so that you can start thinking in a new way. So yeah, this episode was a little bit of a roller coaster. Lots of ebbs and flows, but I hope that what you will get is the importance of being able to hold sometimes conflicting or seemingly conflicting views, seemingly conflicting ideas, is that while we are here and while I'm sitting here talking about travel, there are other people where that's the last thing on their mind. And I have to be able to hold space for both, while still holding so much gratitude that I can even speak about it, that I can even think about it, that it can be part of my priority list. So it's also important to, like, not use this information as a way to hold yourself guilty, as a way to hold yourself back from having experienced certain experiences. If anything, I think it makes the case for having those experiences, making the most out of your life, because it's wild here. It's crazy to me, all the things that are happening. But while we're here, we owe it to ourselves to really look at how far can we extend our own ways of living, to really look at, like, how far can we make the most of what it means to be here, so that when we're not, it matters, it matters, and that we made something of it. So thank you so much for being with me on this roller coaster. I hope you hold space and grace for what it was. That's where I am. And if you before this knew nothing about the genocide happening in Gaza, you knew nothing about what's happening in Sudan, please educate yourself. It's so important. And also think about how at some point that was us, like we lived in an apartheid state, and it took other people in different parts of the world making noise about it, talking about it endlessly, picketing, like going to protests in their own countries and saying that what is happening in South Africa is not right. That's what it took for the rest of the world to go, And South Africa was sanctioned, and it became impossible for the South African regime to be able to continue to make us live under an apartheid state because of what other people were doing. So sometimes it's not about your money, it's just about using your voice. It's just about showing up where you can show up. So if you can, please go to the different platforms, learn, go to where the protests are happening, go on the boycott list, learn what you need to boycott, which brands you can stop buying so that they can start feeling it. And we can maybe do for Palestine what the rest of the world was able to do for us when we needed it most. Thank you so much for tuning in. Until next time.